Hey there, welcome back to another video. We have an old school TH350 non-lockup unit. We're going to break into it and see what's going on inside. And I say old school because it's got that big old vacuum modulator there bolted to the rear, and GM transitioned away from those big giant can-like modulators into more traditional looking ones sometime in the mid-70s. So I imagine when we get inside we will not see a steady rest or a steel sleeve or a pump bearing on the pump, because all that stuff came starting in 1975. So I'm not going to be as long-winded with this video as I was with the TH350C. It's going to be relatively short and concise. I mean, I'll hit on all the main things that you need to know, but mostly it's just going to be me moving through the case and taking everything out of it. So the socket sizes are as follows. Your pump to case bolts, they're going to be ½ inch. This is going to be 7/16, and then all your pressure taps are going to be 7/16 as well. ½ inch on the modulator and pan bolts, and then 9/16 on the extension housing bolts. So this is a two-wheel drive unit. I'm not exactly sure where it came from. My customer brought it to me. He had purchased it as a married pair, engine transmission combo, and he's putting it into a 1961 Impala. So the engine's a 305. Apparently it's got like a mild cam in it, and nothing crazy. And so we're just going to build this up to handle a mild performance type application. So these are the torque converter bolts. They came in with the transmission. So dipstick tube, get that out of the way. All right, so as far as extension housings are concerned, there were 3 different versions primarily. There was the 9-inch version, which is what you see here, the 6-inch version, which is more common, and then there was a very long 12 or 13-inch version that went in onto the long bed pickups, the kind that had the dual or 2-piece drive shafts and center bearings. They weren't all that common when it came to TH350s. It's just mostly these and the 6-inch varieties. So get this out. All right, there we go. So just check your driven gear. These sometimes can be worn or partially stripping. I mean, that happens, but don't ask me why I tried to smack the extension housing off. Gotta take the bolts out first. Alright, now we can grab the hammer. Alright, if you're taking one transmission out of a particular vehicle and installing it into another, you're going to have to check for the appropriate drive and driven gear tooth count combination. So to do that, you'll need to know what your tire size is, your final drive ratio, and you'll need to have at least the tooth count for the drive or the driven gear. And then TCI is a calculator that you can use to type all that information in, and it will spit out the appropriate amount of teeth you should have on whatever gear you're trying to solve for. Okay, modulator. All right, TH350s entered production in 1969, and there were 2 different generations, and there was some overlap between them. First, they had the non-lockup variants. They were in production from 69 to 79, and then you had a lockup variation that went into production in 1978. You don't want to forget your O-ring on reassembly. Okay, and then everything went out of production in 1984. I believe that was the last year for these. All right, modulators can cause a whole bunch of drivability symptoms. I'll do a separate video that gets into that in an appropriate level of detail. So show you how to diagnose and things you can do and tests you can conduct to rule in or out modulator as the source of your problems, but either late, delayed upshifts or downshifts or no upshifts can be attributed to the vacuum modulator. All right, spin your output shaft. Make sure that it's, moving free like you see here. Obviously, you have to take it out of park first, but you should be able to spin it in either direction. There's going to be a little bit of play. A lot of times I'll get questions about folks asking, hey, my output shaft has play in it. Is that normal? I mean, yes, that's perfectly normal. If you get a lot of play, that's not normal. Like that would indicate severe bushing wear in the back of the case. I mean, on overhaul, it's no big deal because you're going to replace the bushing anyway, but as far as just maintenance, then that's something you want to look out for. All right, let me get this D10 cable out of the way. And you always want to replace your D10 cables. Okay, looks like this one has been loosened. You always want to replace the D10 cable or the kick down or throttle valve cable. I mean, these things go by many names. So the new cable will come with a new O-ring. So that'll seal it off, but when they get worn like this, they're liable to either snap altogether or they're stretched and they won't maintain adjustment. So you'll have issues with the kickdown system, which, that could mean anything from no upshift from second to third gear or very late and delayed upshifts or downshifts. So all these transmissions that run off modulators, they're usually plagued by 3 different problem areas: the modulator, the kickdown or D10 system, and a TH400 is electromechanical. These are purely mechanical, and then your governor. Okay, the governor can be a source of concerns as well. All right. For these, you want to be real careful how you take the cover off. So what I'll do is I'll just take a large flat screwdriver that's not grooved, and I'll just tap on it until I can get between the cover and the case, and then slowly work it on either side. All right, and then eventually it'll come off. And then if you want, you can kind of start persuading it out. But again, the main thing is you want to be careful with it, that's all. All right, governor inspection is fairly straightforward. You want to see movement in that valve. See that? That's what you want to see. When you actuate the weights, you want to see the valve move. If you don't see the valve move, then you have to go in there, clean it out a little bit with a bench buddy. Maybe there's crud, and then you're going to have to assess the fitment between the valve and the inner diameter of the bore there. The other things you want to look out for are excessive wear or scoring here on the body and the journal surfaces. Check that out. And then you want to do the same in the governor bore, okay? Now, sometimes repair sleeves are installed, and if that's the case, that would indicate that somebody had been inside the unit before, and a sleeve or a bushing has been necessary to install to restore function because it was leaking, and there was either erratic or no upshifts or downshifts. So, battery's about to die, so let me change it out, and then we'll resume. All right, and one other thing I'll mention about the cover before we move on is this little dimple right here. Okay, make sure that the cover itself's not collapsed in or dented, because if this dimple is somehow interfered with, then it's going to throw off the governor longitudinal travel in the bore. So the governor has to be able to move to and fro, a certain amount. Otherwise, it'll bind up and you'll have all kind of shifting problems. Okay, 9/16 on the selector linkage nut. And they can be problematic. All right, now we're gonna come around to the front of the transmission. So, as always with any transmission where you would measure front end play, where the shaft is, not just such that you could pull it right out like certain Ford transmissions. You just want to check, okay? You want to check to make sure that there is some movement here. All right, TH350s are what I call a free-flowing case design, and that is my term. You're not going to hear that anywhere else. And that means that when you thrust and or push or force everything forward from the rear, it's going to directly change and or move everything in the front, including your input shaft. So everything inside the case is going to thrust. So if you would normally grab your output shaft and turn your input shaft, you're going to feel a little bit of drag, whereas in a TH400 or 4L80E, when you do this, you really shouldn't feel anything. I mean, it shouldn't be such that when you turn the input shaft in any direction, that it's forcing the output shaft to turn. If that's the case, and something's welded inside, and, you know, obviously that's a major problem. But in the TH350s, there is no independent measurement for rear gear end play. Okay, you can shim the bearing in the back of the case to adjust your front end play if you really wanted to. Now, normally they have either the selective washers on the older units like this, or the bearings with the spacers or shims in the newer ones, but you know, you can adjust end play in a few different places in these transmissions. Same with your 700R4s, 4L60Es. In the 4L80s, TH400s, there are separate measurements and separate procedures for front and rear end play with different spec ranges. Okay, 1/2 inch here. Okay, as far as the pumps themselves are concerned, they're getting harder to find. So if you have pump issues, you know, wear in the crescent, or heavy scoring in the body, and or stator half or stator support half, then you will either need to recondition or you'll need to replace. And you know, the pump cover / stator support is fairly straightforward, but the pump body is not. And when it comes to machining, there you really need a vertical mill so that you can maneuver around the crescent and machine out the pocket as you need to. Okay, I'm just going to remove all these pressure taps just to get them out of the way. Then we'll take care of that accumulator cover. So TH350s, 400s, you want to measure line pressure if you're having drivability symptoms. You know, knowing what your line pressure and line rise is can really help you narrow things down and diagnose, you know, any sort of problem that it might be having. Especially if it's a shifting problem and it's not just super obvious that, hey, it's a burnt clutch, or hey, you know, something in the gear train broke. You know, any unusual symptoms, your best bet when it comes to diagnosis is to do a line pressure test in the appropriate ports, and then from there conduct testing on the modulator, inspect the governor, and ultimately the valve body. I mean, the valve body is the brain of the transmission. It's the transmission's mechanical brain. So if you're having a problem there in terms of like scheduling of shifts, or it's not upshifting at all, or it's late and harsh, you know, that could be valve body. It could also be the 1-2 accumulator if it's the 1-2 shift in question that is giving you problems. All right, so somewhere along this body is going to be a little hole. And it looks like it's right here. And this hole is intended to help you knock out and, you know, kind of break loose the snap ring here so that you can withdraw the cover. Okay, looks like I still have a little bit of ways to go with it. There we go. Let me get my pry bar screwdriver. So this is the 1-2 accumulator housing. It is always recommended you replace the spring inside of here, because a lot of times they will break and all of a sudden you'll have a really neck snapping 1-2 shift. And for high performance, you'll want to modify this to the extent you can to allow for very high stall converters, because your shifts will be excessively soft from first to second. But in a stock daily driven application with either a stock or very tight converter stall, you do not want to take chances with that spring in there. Always replace it regardless of what condition it's in at the time when the transmission comes in for overhaul. Okay, there's an O-ring on the back side. Alright, so just like I was saying, very, very common for these things to come apart. Additionally, some folks will modify the spring. This actually looks like it may have been modified, but it could have come apart. I mean, it's hard to tell really, but what some folks will do is take one or two of these coils and cut them off, and that'll firm up the shift. And it's really a judgment call in terms of whether you're going to do that, but I've seen that too. All right, piston. Okay, these sealing rings have to be replaced. If you're slipping in second gear, if it just starts to happen, check the sealing rings here, or maybe just proactively replace them. That might solve the problem. All right, like I said, this transmission supposedly was working. Supposedly. But just from the fluid, a little bit of fluid and crud I'm seeing here in the bore, I don't know about that. All right, we're gonna flip it over now. And that was a little bit more violent than I had anticipated. All right, let me clean up some of this fluid and then we'll take the pan off and resume the tear down. All right, reposition the camera a little bit. So 1/2 inch on all the pan bolts. A couple of them seem loose, but I don't know if that's because the pan was off and then, purposes of either trying to service the transmission or simply drain it of fluid. Customer knows almost nothing about it. Yeah, he had just recently acquired it. He was told it was working, but like I said a few minutes ago, I have my doubts. But, we'll see once we get inside. We'll know for sure. I mean, the governor was working. We have a broken accumulator spring, so if it was working and it was behind a stock, converter, then 1-2 shifts must have been harsh. Must have been harsh. All right, let's see what the pan can tell us. Ooh, yeah. Don't think this transmission was working. I have my doubts, let's just say. Have my doubts. So we have all kind of matter in here. I mean, look at that. That is nasty. Plus the pan is dented, so it's going to need a new pan. but this is like a... Man, look at that. It looks like mud. I would say at least a 32nd of an inch of sludge and granulated material. So, we'll see what we find in here. This should be interesting. Let's get this pan out of the way. Okay, filter takes 2 flathead screwdriver bolts. Okay, never use a cloth style filter on these things. Always use a screen style filter. Okay, cloth filters are notorious for clogging, which causes all sorts of issues. Very nasty. Very nasty indeed. Okay, 1/2 inch valve body bolts, and then your parking pole guide plate is 9/16, or actually I believe it's 5/8. Excuse me. All right, in the TH350Cs, they had an auxiliary valve body here with a solenoid and all that stuff to control the converter clutch. The cases were different as well. They had a 5th check ball in this rough location here. These only take 4, and you only really need 1 check ball, and that's the modulator check ball to operate the transmission in a regular automatic shift pattern. All right, let's start pulling these off. Interested to see how many check balls have been installed and what else might have been done to the unit. All these bolts are the same length. All the same length. All right. I just carefully relieve it off of the linkage arm there. And then take your linkage arm for your kickdown cable. So this has a an aluminum accumulator piston. Sometimes if they're plastic, you know, they'll be broken. You'll always want to replace the accumulator piston if it's plastic with an aluminum one. All right, it's a good sign that the plate to valve body gasket peeled off without too much resistance. It didn't break up or anything. I mean, other than the parts that are still underneath the hold down plate. All right, hold down plate bolts are also 1/2 inch. Oops. All right, it has its own gasket. Okay, it's coming off without resistance as well. All right, just want to make sure that this thing didn't gouge the worm track. All right, Got a valve body video on these already on the channel. So, you know, like any other valve body, that one will be completely overhauled. All right, let's see if the plate comes off. It does. And the gasket is peeling off from the plate. Okay, that's good. I mean, when the gaskets peel off the plate like that, it tells me that there was very minimal, if any, overheating in the transmission, which is always a good sign for obvious reasons. All right, so here are check ball locations. You have a check ball here, here, and then here. Okay, you only need this one. The rest of them you can take out for firmer shifts. This one looks like it's in stock configuration. And then as I was mentioning earlier, the TH350Cs have a check ball up in this general location here. All right, you have your band servo. So it's going to have a cast steel ring, and then you're going to have your little spacer, your keeper or washer, and then your spring stop or spring seat. Okay. Not too many issues associated with these. I mean, other than maybe the sealing ring getting worn out. So here's the whole assembly as it would go into the case. Pretty simple transmission. So inspect the bore, make sure that there's no scoring here in the bore itself. A lot of times if a major hard part failure will occur, you'll see metal passing through the sealing rings or underneath of it, and it'll gouge the bore all up. So you obviously don't want that. All right, you're gonna have your pump filter screen here. Okay, new ones will come in the kit. All right, and you have a filter screen here. This is for your governor, so it goes in this location right here. All right, again, new one will come in the kit. All right, 9/16 on these. I said 5/8. I was right, then I was wrong, and now I'm right again. Okay, nothing really to inspect with these. Just make sure they're not bent up or otherwise damaged. The nut, I believe, is either 11/16 or 3/4. I can never seem to remember. (11/16). All right, these things get torqued down or somehow tightened to something like, I want to say somewhere between 25 and 30 foot-pounds, if I'm not mistaken. And looks like this one wants to be stubborn coming out. Sometimes they're tight like this, sometimes they're not. Yeah, that one's like stuck in there. So just when that happens, you can just pry against the case or use a hammer with a pry bar. Yeah, it's just seized. There we go. No crud on it, you know. It's not like it's, you know, corroded or whatever. There's no lip forming on that side of the shaft, so the case is just tight. Maybe that bore is a little warped. You know, when you have difficulty getting stuff out like that, that sometimes is the problem. Okay, there's a little spring here, and this spring holds back your pole. I'm going to leave that in there now, just so that I can easily slide the entire back half of the transmission forward, at least as far as the ring gear is concerned, where the parking gear is, you know, parking gear lugs, so that I don't have any issues there. Okay, one thing we still have to take out is the modulator valve itself. And when you take this out, try to feel for any kind of drag. Okay, shouldn't be dragging, but if the modulator drags, then that would explain some of the drivability symptoms that the thing may have been having, you know, if they were kind of hard to figure out or diagnose. All right, that's the orientation. That's how it goes in. Okay, this side's inboard. Check it, make sure that it's not scored up. I mean, a little bit of scoring is not going to hurt anything. It's not going to make a difference in terms of its ability to function. But if it's all scratched up and, you know, gouged or whatever, then you'll want to put a different modulator valve in there. Okay, intermediate frictions. You can check your clearance here before you take the pump out. All right, generally speaking, you want to stick to the 10 to 12 thousandths per friction disc worth of clearance. I mean, that's all you really need. So the TH350s that went in behind the V6 and or light duty applications, they had 2 frictions, and in the you know, standard duty they had 3. You can upgrade from a 2 friction to a 3 friction setup by swapping out the apply piston, and I believe the pressure plates or backing plates are also different. So that's how you can deal with that if you're putting your TH350 in behind a more powerful engine or upgrading yours. All right, I'm going to change the camera angle a little bit so that we can then begin taking everything out of the case, starting with the pump, and we'll resume. All right, I have a pump removal tool attached. Normally I use a slide hammer, but you can use this as well. And so all you're going to do is just simply attach the tool and start cranking on the forcing screw, and that will remove the pump for you, you know, relatively quickly and stress-free. So you don't have to worry about displacing anything else inside the case. All you're doing is just taking the pump out. Okay, these are nice to have, especially if you have pumps that either like the TH350 or other transmissions that kind of require you to use something like a slide hammer or you know, a special tool to get loose, because you don't have any pry points here, you know, between the worm tracks and the bottom of the pump from the inside. You can't take it out like you could like a 4L60E or even a 4L80. Okay, so once I have it free, I'm just going to pull it, and out it comes quite easily. So these tools are available, you know, pretty much everywhere, you know, online. Some automotive, you know, auto parts stores will have them. So I want to say they're around anywhere between 75 and 100 bucks, at least for the real nice ones. I'm not saying this one's one of those, but it does work. I've had it for several years and no issues. All right, let's have a look-see at the pump. Okay, so this does have a bearing. I was expecting to find a Babbitt-style selective thrust washer, but there is a bearing here. So there's a bearing, and then there's going to be a shim. So you want to keep your shim and your bearing together and measure them so that if you need to replace the bearing or you need to, adjust end play because other parts changed, you want to have a baseline as far as where you were starting. All right, 1/2 inch on these bolts. Okay, so this TH350 was clearly behind a V8 application. You know that because we have 3 intermediates and you have the shorter piston to allow for that 3 clutch stack up. Okay, so just obviously, note the arrangement here with the springs. I mean, you have the spring bosses, so it's not like you could screw it up. In real super extreme duty applications, you can upgrade this to a 4 clutch stack. You're going to have to machine this piston. You're going to have to probably machine the backing plate as well, because the additional friction and steel will begin to interfere with the intermediate roller assembly's retention plate. Okay, this thing right here. And you'll have a bind up in the case and you'll wonder, well, why do I have no clearance in my intermediate clutch? Well, it would be for that reason. All right, always check your lip seals just for diagnostic reasons. If a clutch has burnt up, you want to find the source or the reason. Okay, it's always helpful to know. And then check your sealing surface. Make sure that both on the inner diameter and the outer diameter, there's no scoring, nothing that would otherwise cut the new lip seals. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3 sealing rings for our direct clutch. We do not have the steady rest as I suspected. Like I said, this is an older unit. And the bearing, I want to say, was introduced either somewhere between 1976 and 1978. I'll annotate the video with the exact year that they started with these bearings. But so we'll get the sealing rings off of here. Okay, bushings in the stator must be replaced. Okay, they are prone to wearing. TH350s are hard on bushings. As a general rule. I mean, you replace all the bushings in the entire transmission regardless, but more so than the 700R4s, the TH350s can be very hard on the bushings. All right, when we get further inside the case and see the front of the output shaft, my guess is there's going to be a bushing in the snout. Later years, they replace that bushing with a plastic style seal, which is actually recommended, that you go back with something like that. You just, get the bushing out of there, drill it out, pull it out, however, and then install the plastic style seal. So that bearing will be replaced. All right, I'm gonna carefully remove my pump cover stator. We'll look at that in a second. So here's our gears for the pump body. Okay, you want to make sure that you check your clearance. Typically what I'll do is I'll clean these off. I'll usually index them, though you don't have to. I'm not going to do it here because it's not really necessary. So you just want to put them aside. As long as they're not scored on the outer diameter, like for example here, and then as long as the teeth are in good shape for the drive and the driven, then you're okay to reuse them. Otherwise, replace them. Now, let me see, actually, I could tell what year I'm working with vintage rather, because they went to thicker gears in, I believe, 1978. You see, it's got a little bit of scoring here, so I'll probably replace these gears. But the older gears were 721 thousandths thick. And that's what we're working with here, 721 thou, 720, 721. They are selective. You can get different thicknesses. You just want to make sure you get the appropriate thickness to get the clearance where you need to be, you know, with the, whatever pump you're working with. All right, so any crescent style pump is prone to wear. You really need to check this crescent area, okay? And I'm looking at this, and this feels like it's worn to me. All right, I'm gonna wash this pump in the jet wash and then inspect it after the fact a lot more closely. But just a priori, that looks like it's worn out, and we may have to replace this pump. Or at least this half of the pump. Very hard to tell when the pump is filthy like this. You really want to do your inspection once you've had an opportunity to clean off the pump. So your lugs on your drive gear are always going to face you or face inboard. So like this. All right, pump cover, same deal. Check the working surfaces. I'm just grabbing old rags. Okay, a little bit of superficial wear. Okay, take your fingernail and kind of go like this across the face. If you feel your fingernail dragging or getting caught up in any of the scoring lines that you see visually, then this thing would need to be, you know, stuck on a lathe and resurfaced. All right, always replace your bushings like I mentioned. They could be a source of issues as well. All right, so for your intermediate clutch, your direct and forward drums, you're gonna have a little cushion plate. Okay, I mean, you can omit this in high stall applications, but for low stall, stock stall, whatever, I would recommend you not do that. I recommend you keep it. Okay, so let's get the whole clutch out. You grab a pick. Sometimes they all come out willingly, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you gotta persuade them. Alright, and then this drum's practically falling out. It's getting hung up on the braking band. Okay, so here is the whole stack up. So you have your cushion plate, and then you have your top steel, which is technically your bottom steel. Okay, a little bit of slip marks on the steel. And then this is your friction. Okay, that looked okay. Looked okay. Okay, and then in the shuffle I may have put these steels out of order. But so far I'm seeing only light slip marks. And the frictions themselves don't appear to be burnt, don't appear to be overly stressed. Okay, the pressure plate or backing plate looks good. Again, superficially it looks good. Not sure why this is not coming out. I think it was holding it back. There we go. There we go, I should say. Okay, direct drum. And the band was actually caught up on the case. There's a location here in the case that secures the band, so that's kind of what was happening. All right, the band has, I would say, a normal amount of wear to it. I mean, obviously bands get replaced. Direct drum, check your band bearing surface. All right, my hands are filthy, so I'm probably making it look worse than it is, but from what I'm seeing here, it looks okay. You can take a straight edge with a flashlight, shine the flashlight, and see if you can see any light from the other side coming underneath the straight edge. If so, then this will need to be turned. Okay, sprag rotation. Freewheels counterclockwise, locks clockwise. Okay, why is that? It's because the clutch basket is facing rearward in this transmission. Okay, anytime the clutch baskets where you have an intermediate sprag or intermediate roller clutch, where in the drum, the clutch basket is facing front, then the one-way clutch assembly is going to freewheel clockwise and lock counterclockwise. Here it's the exact opposite because the clutch basket is facing rearward. Alright, so let me see if I can get this out with the pick here. I don't know if I can. Alright, I'm going to have to get some snap ring pliers. Let's look at the clutch pins and we'll deal with the roller assembly in a minute. Okay. So you're going to have 4 frictions and 4 steels. You can machine that piston here to accept an additional friction and steel for high performance. It's recommended. The main thing you want to be mindful of when you do that is you don't want to machine it too much such that the bottom steel, the little exterior tabs will dip underneath the lugs here on the drum itself. Okay, because there's lugs down there, and I'm doing a really poor job of angling this thing, but anyway, there's lugs down there that if they catch the bottom steel, then it's going to be a problem. You're not going to have any third gear. You're not going to have any reverse either, for that matter. You'll have what's called a no apply situation. All right, our backing plate, and then frictions, steel, friction, steel, no signs of slipping or burning, friction and steel. Okay, and that's your bottom steel. So that clutch pack looks good. All right, this has a piston where all of the individual return springs are loose. All right, let me go to the foot press and we'll get that piston out of there and then we'll take a look at it. Take a look at the lip seals. Okay, so here's your setup. These spring configurations can vary from model to model, unit to unit. So you just want to take note of what you have. And best practice is to just put them back in just like, but if you're doing high performance, you want all of the return springs installed regardless of how it came initially. So here's your piston. Okay, you have a reasonable amount of meat to work with. If you want to turn it so you can put, you can put more frictions and steels. Generally, 1 friction and 1 steel is what you'll be able to squeeze in there in addition. So 5 frictions, 5 steels, and that will make for a nice heavy duty or high performance type clutch stack. So with some nice high energy or stage 1 Rebestis or Alto, performance frictions, Borg Warner high energy will do nicely. Okay, so for the center seal, okay, the lip faces up or faces you. If you want a dual feed, you would leave this out, and then you would leave the of the 3 large sealing rings in the stator, you leave the middle one out, and that will allow this entire cavity to fill with fluid. Then the other thing you'd have to do on the case is you'd have to plug the high reverse feed port, and I'll point that out later. But that is the extent of dual feeding when it comes to the direct clutch piston. Keep it there. All right, let's take a look at the forward drum. Okay, you're gonna have a thrust washer here, and this is gonna go on the front planet. So I'll just put it back in there for now, and then we can look at it later. All right, your bearing is gonna look just like this, and it's gonna be oriented just like that. Slippery hands today. Okay, forward frictions look good, or at least the clearance appears right. What was I going to say? Something about that bearing. Oh yeah, generally speaking, those bearings are okay to reuse. It's rare you have to actually replace them. All right, so let's look at the forward clutch pack. See if there's anything noteworthy. Okay, you have your cushion plate in the forward. And then here's your apply plate or backing plate. Okay, these are selective, and you can look on the bottom of the lug here. You see this one has a single large cutout. That indicates that this is in the middle of the road in terms of thickness. The ones that have two, cutouts just like this, that would indicate that it's on, I believe, the thinner side, and then there's one that has no indicator marks at all. Then that would indicate it's a little bit thicker. Okay, so here's our top friction. Steel. As you can see, there's some stress here. These frictions are a bit worn, a little burnt. You can see some heat. Okay, they all look pretty much the same way. And again, I mixed up my order. This is our bottom steel. All right, I didn't show this with the direct drum, but like you want to make sure that when you go back with it, you have your snap ring with the ends between the two locking bosses. Okay, the forward drum, much like the direct drum, there's some meat on the piston. All right, the pistons are basically, for all intents and purposes, they're the same style of piston. And I'm just sticking them all in different containers so I don't get them mixed up. I know my taller container contains the forward piston springs. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. Okay, check this little journal here, this little pilot. This will go into the bushing in the rear, and I'm looking at it, it does have a bushing and it's very worn out. Okay, you always want to replace that bushing with the plastic insert style seal. I mean, you could put a new bushing in there too for a stock application. It's not going to make that much of a difference, but for anything performance, I like the seals. Okay, these lip seals feel okay to me. Okay, one thing too you want to make sure you check is these bleeder balls. Just shake the drum. Okay, you can feel the bleeder ball moving and you can hear it. It should be audible on video. Okay, and then you want to check your journal. Down here, up here. 600, 800, or 1,000 grit sandpaper will clean up anything that's minor. Anything more severe than that, like if you could feel grooves here, then I would just replace the whole shaft and drum. The drums themselves never change between the lockup and non-lockup versions. It's just the shafts that are different. So you can press the shafts in and out. That's perfectly fine. As long as you do it on a press, don't beat them out with a hammer and then beat the new one in or the replacement in with a hammer. I mean, that's where you kind of run into problems. And then Although you see me doing it here, I say this numerous times across all my videos. If you're new to a given transmission, it's a good idea to leave the lip seals in positions. Let them go through the cleaning process like that. It's not going to hurt anything. So that'll help you determine what new lip seals go where in the event there's any confusion about it. All right. So here's our forward clutch hub, and then the thrust washer, like so. A bushing that gets replaced. Check teeth. Check the surface in here. Check your lugs when you take this apart. There's a snap ring here. All right, make sure these are not excessively worn, because if they are, you'll want to replace at least the flange. Okay, and you're also going to check the corresponding engagement teeth on the ring gear itself. Check your lugs here, make sure that they're not heavily grooved. If so, your forward clutches are going to get caught up. And again, you'll have a no apply or a delayed engagement, and eventually they'll burn up because they're constantly getting hung up and they're not applying as they should. This has some scoring. I don't know how severe I would consider this, given it's still dirty, so kind of flag for closer scrutiny later. Okay, then you have a snap ring, and then you have your front planet, your Sunshell, center support, and rear gear train. So let me get the snap ring pliers for that. Can be difficult to see, so if my head's in the way, I apologize. And that one flying. Alright, now we're going to grab our front planet. It should just come out. There we go. So front planet. Okay, and you have your thrust washer. Alright. It's always recommended to replace these thrust washers, especially if you see signs of excessive wear to them. Just buy the whole kit. Okay, this is going to be your thrust spacer, for lack of a better term. It's not really a bearing per se. Okay, later models had roller bearings. The surfaces were rollarized. You can retro them as service packs. Okay, we have the Sunshell along with the thrust washer between the back of the shell and the center support. It's just like a 4L60 or $700 thrust washer, except that they went to plastic in those 4-speeds. All right. I'm gonna see if I can get this snap ring off. It is kind of a pain. I don't know to what extent the camera may or may not have seen that. Have to take it out. Okay. And then you're going to have your thrust plate. Just note the orientation. Put it back the same way it came off. Okay, the Sunshell is a hard part in these units. At least I consider them to be a hard part. So check the body for cracks. Every once in a while I'll see a Sunshell come in. I have a big old fault line going, you know, down one side or the other. Check the teeth in here. Make sure that they're not excessively worn. Also the lugs. Okay. All right. These lugs sometimes will be really, really worn out. And you'll have a very noisy transmission. So if you see any of those things, then just replace the shell. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory at that point. All right, sun gear. So teeth, you're going to replace your bushings. Okay, make sure the you know, in the area the snap ring groove is not somehow worn out for any reason. Okay, again, you don't have to actually remove this snap ring. You can just sit there just like this and then leave this one alone. Okay, this is going to be the front, and then this is going to face, you know, rear or be oriented rearward. All right, let's grab that center support snap ring so we can start removing everything else in here. So I'm just using this screwdriver with a notch cut in it. Let's grab onto the snap ring and then yank it. Okay, unlike the TH400s, 4 LEDs, these are not beveled, so don't have to worry about it. And, you know, you can put it in whichever orientation you want. All right, so I'm gonna move the case forward a little bit so I can pound the output shaft and get the center support dislodged and freed up. Probably should have taken that off first. All right, won't be able to yank the center support, excuse me, the output shaft out of the case because there's, well, in addition to the drive gear for the speedo, there's the ring gear. Okay. Have we found the source of all that burnt clutch material? I think we have. Okay, here's your 3-tab washer. That goes on your ring gear. And kind of fish through. Look at that. It looks like a steel plate, but it's actually a friction plate. It should have friction material on it, but it does not. Okay, so that's the whole clutch. Let's have a look-see. Look at that. You have Steels, and then you have Steels Junior. Okay, so this side of the friction is okay. This one's heavily burnt. A lot of slipping. And then you have basically no friction material left, just a very thin veneer. Steel. This one's been completely wiped. Okay, if you need to tighten up the clearance in the intermediate, this is pretty much drop in. I mean, all you got to do is cut all the inner teeth off of it, and you could stick this in between the apply piston and the pocket there on the back side of the pump cover, and you've just tightened up that clutch. Okay, and that's assuming you have excessive clearance. Okay, it's a real good move for high performance and or heavy duty towing and hauling. You don't want a lot of clearance in that intermediate. Okay. I would say more so for heavy duty towing and hauling. High performance, it's not as, you know, having excessive clearance isn't as big of an issue. In fact, you can argue it's maybe a little bit desirable because you're shifting at wide open throttle, maybe 6,000 RPMs. So, okay, so we have a snap ring that we have to remove off of the output shaft. And there it is right here, the ends of it anyway. All right, unlike the other one, this one stayed put. Okay, the two snap rings differ in size and appearance in most cases. So this is going to be for the front planet. This is going to be for the rear ring gear. You know, it's kind of difficult to mix them up. So it's not something to really worry about. Okay, here's the output shaft itself. Check your journal surfaces, all your splines. Okay, if you want to remove the drive gear, you can. It looks like this thing's a little chewed up, so we will be doing exactly that. You know, you can use a special puller and just yank this off, or what you can do is just take a screwdriver, kind of wedge it in here, so that you can collapse the little retention tabs on this little keeper, and then just simply take a drift and start pounding it off. I mean, these, you know, these little lockers or keepers, whatever you want to call them, they're readily available. So if you break it, don't worry about it. Okay, check your governor gear teeth. Make sure they're okay. On the governor itself, I didn't mention, but you always replace the gear on the governor itself. Okay, never reuse that gear. They're generally hardened. Sometimes they're worn, and if it's bad enough, you'll have shifting issues, including a no upshift at a first condition. All right, a little bit of heat sustained, but nothing, you know, nothing I'd worry about. Overall, it looks fine. Again, like I said, I do my real inspections when all this stuff is cleaned off. So same thing as the front ring gear, you have a snap ring here. So you can take that off, or apart, I should say. Now just get in your pick. Let's go around. So you can replace these two parts individually. So if you have a bad journal, or this is all scored up here on the thrust surface, or these teeth for engagement into the ring gear are no good. You know, maybe they're really worn and thin. That sometimes is observed. Then you want to replace it. So here is your teeth on the ring gear. They look good. I mean, like I said, this suffered a soft parts failure. So my guess is the apply piston for the low reverse in there, the lip seals are shot or cut. Usually they just get worn out, and that's the end of it. Okay, and then here's your bearing. Okay, the bearing goes on the back of the flange like this. Alright, so I got to get in there with a special tool. I'll take out the snap ring, and then from there I'll turn the compressor on, and then we'll blow out the low reverse piston with air through the low reverse feed port in the case. Alright, we have the tool in position, so now I'm just going to take 90-degree snap ring pliers so that I can pop out that snap ring for the return spring assembly and free up the low reverse piston. I got it part way out. And here it comes. These can sometimes be stubborn in TH350s. I'm not really sure why. Some will come right out, others will not. Okay, here's a tool. And then The return spring assemblies on the early TH350s at low reverse have all individual springs, just like the intermediate and forward and direct clutch packs. So the later units all had captured return spring assemblies. In other words, it was just, you know, you had a spring plate and then all the individual springs just snapped into place, just like a 700R4 or a 4L60E style return spring assembly. So these are a little bit different. No big deal. Obviously, you need to have the case vertical when you're going back with it for, you know, especially for this kind of configuration. Well, anyway, let me turn on the air compressor and then we'll pop the low reverse piston out. Alright, before we go any further, come back to the direct drum. Kind of emptied the case out, but totally skipped over the intermediate roller assembly. So I want to take that apart. We're going to replace the outer race with a heavy duty version from Sonics. I never reuse these factory races. They are prone to failure. So you always want to replace them, even in non-performance builds. You always want to make sure that you don't go back with these older races. Okay. This snap ring can be stubborn. In fact, it seems like they, you know, things want to fight me today on this transmission. I don't know why. Okay, they make spiral lock rings too for this. I may actually put one on. I don't like these factory snap rings, so they're not expensive. It's a good idea to upgrade. Alright, so like I said, we're not going to put this back on, but if you were on some kind of extreme budget and you were just doing a purely stock rebuild, nothing performance or heavy duty in any way, shape, or form, you can inspect this for reuse. Just make sure make sure that the lugs are in good shape, but make sure the inner surface doesn't show excessive wear. You can scuff it up with some emery cloth to restore cross hatching if you'd like, but as mentioned, none of that's really necessary because you're not really going to use it anyway. Okay, you always replace this, so this will get a new one-way clutch, and that'll do it for the direct drum. So I went roaring through the gear train without flipping the drum over and taking off that roller clutch. So all right, let's go ahead and turn the case vertical and force out that lower reverse. Oh, there it goes. I was going to say we would normally put air right here, but this just dropped right on out. It's not supposed to do that. So let me see if I can get a close-up of this thing. So you got 3 sealing rings, and they are rock hard. Like this one here, I mean, yeah, you can't feel it through the camera, but I mean, this thing is as hard as a rock. I mean, it's a little awkward for me to try to do this. Let me see if I can just do it over here on the bench real quick. What I'm trying to do is cut the sealing ring with a 90-degree pick that I've kind of hacked, in half a little bit to give it a sharp edge. And it is not trying to cut into this one ring here. It's hard as a rock. I don't know how much of what I'm doing right now is on camera, but I'll bring it closer so you can see what's going on once I get this thing apart, or once I get this sealing ring off. I mean, that's what we're looking at. Okay. These are rubber square cut sealing rings, or square cut seals, however you'd like to say it. The bottom line is that these have been hardened to the point where they are basically plastic and completely and totally ineffective at sealing anything. Okay, here's the middle ring. Breaks right in half. Alright, so we know why the low reverse clutch failed, and that's always comforting as a builder, because you don't want any kind of unexplained failures that don't have a readily obvious direct cause or set of causes that where you need to go hunting and doing like almost like a forensic examination of the transmission down to, you know, each little part and component to try and figure out exactly what happened. I mean, even the innermost sealing ring here is rock hard. And not wanting to come out. Alright, maybe I'll call this something like Autopsy on a TH350. Smoked low reverse, or no reverse. This would not have had any reverse whatsoever. Jesus fuck. Okay. Alright, no need to do any more investigative work other than carefully inspect the sealing surfaces here in the case where the low reverse piston goes. You want to just make sure that there's not a case-driven reason for the failure that you see here. You know, having rock-hard sealing rings, especially on low reverse pistons for these transmissions, 700 R4s, 4L60Es, is not all that uncommon. I mean, it's not common, but it's not uncommon either. Like, it's not like something that is completely and totally unusual or out of left field where you're just left mystified. I don't know, 1 out of every maybe 40 to 50 come in where you have this condition, and, you know, the symptom was, of course, no reverse. I mean, you know, forward worked, it'll shift 1, 2, and then, you know, in 3, but you would have no reverse whatsoever. Alright, so this thing will get a complete cow kit. We'll do a steel module as well, and we'll also upgrade the intermediate outer sprag race to a Sonex heavy duty version. Another popular upgrade for these, and we'll do that with this one too, is the center support from a 4L60E. It'll retro right in place of the pre-existing one. No mods necessary, so we'll go ahead and do that. The benefit there is the much stronger low roller one-way assembly there, low roller clutch. The 4L60E 700R4 low rollers very rarely fail, but the TH350s, it's a relatively frequent failure point. So if you're doing anything high performance, I mean, it's a mandatory upgrade. Clutch module can be factory. I mean, we're not, you know, like I said, this is going to be a cruiser, daily driver. We don't need to do anything special. Bushing kit, thrust washers, filter obviously, and then the Sunshell, I'm going to take a closer look at it to see if we need to change out the shell. If so, then we'll put a shell in here too. But other than that, just like all the obvious stuff, you know, new paper and rubber kit, seals, gaskets, you know, part for the course, usual run-of-the-mill stuff. Okay, I'm gonna have to real closely inspect the pump, particularly the pump body, if we need to put gears or if we need to have that that pump body remachined. Then you know it'll be into it for that, as well as a new set of gears. And like I mentioned, those gears are selective, so you know typically what's done is you just step up to the next biggest or next thickest size and you machine it accordingly for that. Alright, that about does it for this one. As always, thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below. I have a plethora of TH350 related content already on the channel, so I figured we just do this one real quick because I don't have a non-lockup teardown inspection or, you know, autopsy on TH350 yet, so this will serve that purpose. Alright, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. We'll catch you on the next video.